Hey everyone, welcome to week 11. Great discussions last week and questions that you asked. Thank you so much for posing those questions and watching the extra resources that I provided. As you noticed this week, I've provided some more resources for you to consider. In this big topic of managing the classroom and student behavior. In the classroom as a teacher, you really are a leader, and a leader of any team or any group, or if you've been a captain of anything, you know you have to manage people and you manage the things that are going on. Same thing in a classroom. So when you manage 25 plus students, there has to be a lot of expectations, routines, clear communication that comes through planning and practice in managing. It's much more than just rewarding and punishing and reprimands and things like that. So this week, lots of great learning in your book. I love the interview by the sub. I think that's great. And she's going back to school to, they call it alternative route to licensure. You will hear something called Teach America, which is another alternate way to get your teacher licensure. They hire a lot of Teach America applicants in schools that don't have a lot of applicants or where they're short teachers, but it's basically where people go to school and get a degree in something else, and then they decide they want to be a teacher, and so they take these courses and then kind of have a apprenticeship internship thing within a school, and then they get their teacher licensure. So that's what she's talking about there. Classroom management is so huge. If you don't have effective classroom management strategies, there's no learning that's going to happen in your classroom. And that's just the bottom line of it. This summer at our school, we had a professional development, and the person that came was all about behavior management more than just classroom management, but behavior management is a part of your classroom management that you'll read about this week. But one of the questions that she posed was, do your students know that what you mean you're going to do and follow through with? So do they know that you mean what you say? And students will read you like a book, and they will know if you false threaten, if you don't follow through. So my number one biggest piece of classroom management advice is when you say you're going to do something, do it. It builds trust in your classroom. Greet your students as they walk in the door every single day with a smile and a hi. Makes a huge difference. Something as simple as that takes a couple minutes. But it truly does make a difference. And you're going to read about that in this interview with Harry Wong. So I can almost guarantee you that in one of your pre-service classes, you're going to read a book by Harry Wong and Rosemary Wong, who's his wife. It's called The First Weeks of School. And it is probably the most popular teacher education book. I've probably read it 4 times. I read it in my pre-service classes, and then I've also read it 2 or 3 times at least, and it's sitting on my bookshelf at school as I've mentored teachers. It's fantastic, fantastic book. But all of this goes back to those procedures and expectations that you put in place that make your classroom run smoothly. This chapter provides you with a lot of good strategies for how you can do that. A couple of things I wanted to point out. So in the teacher interview on page 372, and I think you can probably think in your experience as students, which teachers have effective classroom management and which teachers waste a ton of time because they don't have classroom management and possibly have a lot of behavior issues within their lessons because they don't have the best classroom management strategies put in place. But one section she talks, looking back, I realized that I lacked a defined set of rules and expectations, consistent follow through, like I just talked about, and the appropriate amount of assertiveness with empathy. As a leader of the room, you have to be assertive. You have to demand that students do what you're expecting them to do. Now, in saying that, those things that you ask students to do have to be things that you would do. So the golden rule, if you follow that within your classroom and you do exactly as you expect students to do, there will be no problems. They're going to call your bluff depending on what grade. And you guys know you have teachers that have rules put in place and then don't follow them. And it's super frustrating. Um, she says that they figured it out within 20 seconds that she didn't have the assertiveness. They could push her over. And she's talking about 26 third graders. So you have to have that assertiveness. And I'm sure you guys experience assertiveness with some teachers and then some teachers who don't have that assertiveness. It comes with confidence. So believing that you're the leader of that classroom, having confidence within your abilities, standing strong, believing in the consequences, whatever they may be, that you have set up. So if you ask a student to move to another desk, they're going to move to that other desk. And then have a plan for when they don't move the first time. I'm going to count to 3, whatever that might be, but then they have to move. If they don't move and you don't make them move, you can throw your classroom management out the window. Because then every other student just witnessed that you said something and then didn't do it. Like I said, it's far more than rules, reprimands, and rewards. Classroom management are the procedures that go into day-to-day learning in your classroom. Let's see what else I wanted to point out here. There's so much underlined in this chapter. It's awesome. Oh, on page 378, you see this little red, yellow, and green chart. Almost every single school, elementary school, is going to have some kind of a red, yellow, and green chart that students move from. The biggest piece that I want you to take away from this, positive reinforcement is amazing. It's backed up by a ton of research that when we say things like, I really like the way that Tommy's sitting quietly and looking at the person that's talking, by pointing out that positive behavior, every other student sitting on that carpet is going to start doing what Tommy was doing. They want to be recognized for doing the right thing. Human beings are the same way. I use it as a volleyball coach. It works. So keep that in mind. It really, really works. Point out the positives, students will change their behaviors versus harping on the negatives. But this chart and this section on 378 is really important. If you're going to reward a student, which is good, you cannot take that reward away. So I'm sitting there quietly and we have a marble jar system. So you put a marble in the jar for me because I'm sitting there. And then 15 minutes later, I sharpen my pencil when I'm not supposed to sharpen my pencil while you're teaching a lesson. Taking my reward away then makes me not like you because you gave it to me for something that I did right, and then you directly took it away for something that I did wrong, and the two aren't connected. So if you're going to give rewards, they stay as rewards. You can't take them away. Big point that I want to make. The classroom rhythms, the teacher's lounge is great. She talks about how important it is to get to know your students, and it really, really is. If you plan on teaching elementary school and you're with the same 25, 26 kids all day for the year, you get to know each other so well. If you're in a big school or even in a small school and you teach middle school or high school, you have a lot more students that come into your room. But still to make it a point to notice like what they're wearing. Do they like a certain sports team? Do they fish? Do they hunt? Do they really like to read? You'll see them carrying around books, simple things that you can notice them doing. Point that out and have a short conversation with them about that. This Every Child Deserves a Champion is my all-time favorite video from an educator from Texas. She passed away a few years ago. But what she says in this video, I watch it at least every school year, if not way more than that. Really tugs at your heartstrings in what she believes for kids. So that's amazing. Make sure that you watch that one. Let's see. The democratic classroom in the class meeting is something I think you guys will really enjoy reading about and learning about. That was some new learning that I had. The understanding and using evidence is really interesting, and how much time can be wasted with simple things that we do all day long and how that time really adds up, and then some ways that you can cut down on that time. Managing paperwork, which we use technology to do that now, but being organized within your technology. So a lot of schools are Google schools, so we use everything Google Docs, Google Drive. But if you guys use Google Drive as students, you notice that you get thousands and thousands of things in your Google Drive. So having folders to organize those is another key thing. Organization is a huge skill of effective teachers. So if you don't feel like you're very organized, that might be something that you need to work on. let's see. I'm excited because I want you guys to bring up some of these things that you learned. So I'm not going to go through too much more of this. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out, one other thing that I wanted to point out to you, was on page 394, it talks about listening to students when something's going on. There's some research behind that also that I learned this summer from the speaker that came and talked to us, that if you get students talking, it relieves some of the emotion. And that's why cops ask questions when they pull you over, is because it gets you talking and it relieves your angst and possible anger. So they ask you questions, and I never made that connection before, but it's actually like criminal justice researched that if you ask human beings questions and get them talking, it relieves like their emotions through speaking. So there's an example of that on the top of page 384. This week's discussions are pretty similar to last week's, or kind of similar. So I've included some extra resources here that I want you to take a look at. This is a video. This is an interview Q&A session that you'll read about with Harry Wong, which is great. And then this is a quote. It's actually a picture I took last week from a book from Rick Wormeli. And it's just a great quote to think about as what the impact that you have as a teacher in the classroom. And part of that, and the reason that I'm attaching all of these things, is because part of your classroom management is your belief in students and that growth mindset that we continue to talk about. So in creating your personal philosophy, this is an activity that I want you to complete for this week. Please make sure that you have this posted by Thursday. And then this one, I'd love it if you would read each other's and comment, but I'm not going to require that. But would love for you to read each other's on that activity. It's just kind of an individual reflection activity. And then I want you to use I used to think, but now I know, to respond with your 3 statements that you learned. So that can be from any of the resources, similar to what we did last week. Last week I required 4. This week I'm requiring 3. And I want you to use the format I used to think, but now I know. So I gave an example from last week's learning, and I want you to add 2 questions. I loved that I was able to answer some of the questions that you had. So I want to continue to do that. That was really nice for you to be able to ask questions and for me to actually answer them. Felt like we could have a dialogue about your learning. So this is due Thursday, and then read and respond to 2 other students' posts, or you could respond back to my answers as well by Sunday. Have a great week. Let me know what questions you have. Kennedy and Mackenzie, awesome job getting those observation hours done over the next few weeks, hopefully. And Courtney and Lupita, you are done. So you can submit to me your signatures form if you want to scan that in an email. Email that to me. That would be great.